Awaited escapely. Today we continue on with the second half of the Aeneid as Turnus gathers people for battle and Aeneas ends up getting help too. When Turnus is roused to anger, when the Fury sort of puts that terrible anger into him and that determination to fight Aeneas, he goes out and starts recruiting other people to help. He's able to frame it that the Trojans are invaders, that they're coming from a foreign land to start rolling over all these neighboring kingdoms, and probably with Juno's help, ends up getting quite a lot of people to fight with. This is very similar to the way that like Agamemnon and Menelaus got a bunch of Greek heroes together before the Iliad, and it's supposed to draw some parallels that way. However, in Virgil, Turnus is the bad guy, and the people that he's got on his side are also generally going to be kind of over the top evil. We have Camilla, this warrior queen, and she is actually very interesting as a character in there. She fights as well as anybody else in the army, and has like a very interesting backstory where like her father saved her life with a spear, literally like tied this baby to a spear and threw it across a river to save her from enemies. And so since she was saved by a spear as an infant, she lived by it for the rest of her life. We've got Mezentius, a really interesting side character, and his son Lausus. Mezentius is a king, and he despises the gods. He curses them all the time. He says they have no power over him constantly, and he's honestly kind of tempting fate the whole time. Modern readers tend to find him really interesting because he's so out of place. But the general impression I get is that Romans would consider him like distinctly uncomfortable as a character. They'd want, bad things to happen to them. They'd be so off-put by this. There are other nobles and neighboring kings who Turnus persuades to fight off these Trojans. But Mezentius, his son Lausus, and Camilla are probably the most important. Aeneas hears about all this happening from Latinus and asks Latinus what to do. And Latinus tells him, you have to go upriver. Now, that's tough. Hostile people on both sides of the river. So Aeneas prays for help. He ends up getting it. In Greek and Roman mythology, all rivers have gods. You can usually see them. They're usually old men with like very long beards. They tend to be laying down when they're in art. And they usually have a jug or something else like this, constantly flowing water out. When Aeneas is asleep, he gets a vision from Tiberinus, who's the god of the Tiber, who promises to help him upstream. The flow of the river literally reverses itself around two of Aeneas's ships, and he leaves his son Ascanius to lead the defense. One of the things that the Aeneid is not super consistent about is time. Some of you guys might be remembering like the little Ascanius who was like running away from Troy, the one who was like basically sitting in Dido's lap way back when, or actually, yeah, that was Cupid pretending to be Ascanius. But Ascanius is a young teenager at this point, and he's been learning everything from the hero who helped hold Troy for 10 years. The kid knows how to run a siege from the defensive defensive side of it. And the Trojans respect him immediately because he's Aeneas' son and because Aeneas picks him. He's also got older, wiser people to sort of keep keep him in line with this and to help him figure out what to do. Aeneas goes upstream with two of the ships, and he goes to a kingdom called Pallantium. The king of Pallantium is named Evander. It's literally Greek for good man. And Evander lives in a place called Arcadia or Pallantium. Arcadia seems to be like the bigger area there, and Pallantium is his little kingdom in it. It's a simple area. They hardly have houses. Even Evander, the king, only has like what would be like a normal, simple house. And he doesn't have much, but when Aeneas arrives, he's performing a sacrifice. When you remember Roman attitudes to religion, you're immediately supposed to think something pretty good about Evander if that's the first thing you see of him. He greets Aeneas. He turns out to have been like having conflicts with Turnus, for a while, something about like a border or land rights or something like that. And he even knew Anchises. Apparently, Anchises had traveled to Italy at this point, and he even has some old weapons that Anchises had given to Evander way back in the day as hospitality gifts. The hospitality he shows Aeneas is really simple. Aeneas spends the night. I think he's even sleeping on like a bed of straw with a cloak over it. And he tells him stories of his country and his people, about the time when Hercules came through with the cattle of Geryon way back when. Evander doesn't have a ton of soldiers, but his son, Pallas, is a pretty good warrior, despite being kind of young. He's sent to help Aeneas. Pallas is the one that the kingdom is named after. Evander is clearly looking forward to having his son be this next king. When Aeneas is about ready to go back into his ships, he embraces his son tenderly. He tells him to come back, and he pleads with Aeneas to take care of his son. Again, his only son, Pallas. Aeneas is happy to do this. He takes an immediate liking to this kid who's carrying weapons that his father once held, and they head back down the stream. Venus is watching all this from above. Venus, the mother of Aeneas. And the thing is, she's worried too. This is going to be a conflict as tough as the Trojan War. And now Aeneas is in that number one spot. In the Trojan War, he was always in Hector's shadow. In the Iliad, he's, I've heard people call him a bit character, but I think that's too, small. So now Venus knows all eyes are on Aeneas, and she wants to make sure that he's going to be safe. And it's worth remembering that even though Venus is Aeneas' mother, his father was a mortal man, and Venus is married to another one of the gods. If you remember, that god is Vulcan, the god of the forge, literally the one who makes armor and weapons for God. Venus approaches him and asks him very tenderly to make armor for her son Aeneas. Normally, you'd expect this to be kind of an awkward exchange, but Vulcan seems very understanding about it and very happy to do this. And he makes a marvelous set of armor, something that would be worthy of Mars himself to wear, for Aeneas to wear on the battlefield. The description of the shield takes several hundred lines because he engraves half of Roman history upon it, things that will not happen in the timeline of our story for centuries. The centerpiece of it is actually the Battle of Actium, where Augustus defeated Mark Antony for the final time. When Aeneas returns to Italy, it's literally in the forest, hung up on a tree. And he's amazed to see it. He sees this shield, better, lighter and stronger than anything he's ever carried. This set of armor that nothing can pierce, and a helmet that's conspicuous from across the battlefield. And he knows it's for him. His mom does tell him that, but he's just amazed at the sight of it. All these events here correspond to one book of the Aeneid, and it's really rising tension at this point. Turnus gathering his soldiers, Aeneas getting his help and his armor. This is specifically to draw attention and to really get things to be very suspenseful before this final battle gets started. We've got Pallas, this new character. We're seeing little side characters coming up, but the big thing here is going to be Aeneas and Turnus. And at this point, it's worth remembering that Turnus has very personal motivations for this fight. This Trojan came in and stole his wife. But as far as Aeneas is concerned, he wanted to get out of this without fighting at all. And he feels kind of trapped into it. So the conflict is a little uneven in that respect. We'll see more about this in the next video, which is going to cover, again, probably about one book of the Aeneid. And I will hopefully see all you guys there. Take care.